All right, thank you for staying with us. This is Daybreak on Trust Television. Moving on to our main discussion of the day. Now, climate change is now a familiar concept in policy corridors across the globe, but it is almost absent in political campaigns during elections in Africa. Yet Africa is widely acknowledged as a region with the least resilience to climate change impacts that have become more frequent and unprecedented in scale. It is a poor reflection on would-be leaders who fail to appreciate that the governance challenges they aspire to undertake have become complicated by the phenomenal ecological disturbances that we now witness across the local to national and transnational scale. Consequently, there is no room for business as usual governance, as most developmental challenges facing Africa today are either exacerbated by climate change or have been made more difficult to resolve due to the climate change. Now, on the program today, we draw attention of the major contenders for the 2023 presidential election on the need to take climate change seriously and what action plan that politicians should focus on ahead of the election. We have in the studio the team lead of GIFSEP and Africa Regional Coordinator, Citizens Climate International, David Mike Teungwa. He is joining us here live in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
Thank you so much for having me and choosing to discuss this very important issue that is totally missing in the campaign so far.
Yes. Well, let me start by asking, how much of a threat do you think that this issue of climate change is for us here in Nigeria? I know that we've had this, floods in recent past, but can it get worse than what we've seen?
Yes, it can get worse because climate change is a threat to our existence first. It's a threat to food security. It's a threat to our health. It's a threat to our economy. So what more can you ask for? It's a threat to virtually everything that we do. And that is why it is very important that these issues should be topical in the front burner of our campaigns so far. We are really disappointed that, this is a global issue. Yes, Nigeria, we just few months back, we saw the floods, 2020 floods, and we saw how farmlands were washed, human lives were lost, our infrastructure damaged. We saw that the country was divided for almost 2 weeks. People couldn't travel from the southern part to the north. But these are just a tip of the iceberg as what will continue to happen. This will eventually become like a new normal.
It will sound a bit unfair to say that the presidential candidates, here we are talking about presidential candidates, or perhaps maybe other candidates at other levels, to say that the conversation about climate change is absent in their campaigns. Looking at the manifesto of the various political parties, the APC, for instance, talks about climate change and their plans to have irrigation and water catchment, irrigation program, so that it can help to boost food production and unemployment while helping to mitigate the harmful effects of extreme weather cycles and climate change. In addition to participating in the project, participation in the project will also support domestic farmers, produce offtake guarantees, link farmers to markets and the rest of them. So you may say it's in passing, but at least there's a mention. Labour Party says it has been that it is going to establish what they call a green army tasked with identifying all opportunities to tap into the $3 trillion international climate finance to engineer economic growth and employment for millions of youths in the country and all that. The NNPP also captures the issues of climate change when it talks about power. It says that it will promote, intensify existing research into simple rural energy systems, including kerosene stove and solar energy, exploit and utilize the massive gas resources. I'm taking time to go through this so that the candidates will not feel, unfairly.
Yes.
Unfair rather,
Yes.
when we talk about this. So there's a bit of a mention of some of these issues. Clearly, you don't seem to be satisfied with this.
Yes, and I will say that personally, we carried out a research and we went through some of the manifestos of all the political parties, and we've listened to them, talk about climate and environmental issues. And I can say that it is so shallow. It is not deep-rooted. It is not enough to just come and say, hey, we are going to provide solar for everybody. Hey, we are going to act on climate. Recently, I watched one of the presidential candidates just, before now, he said that this is a white man's thing, but, it's changing now. The other one a few days ago just simply said he was going to follow the laid down procedures. Now, what I'm saying is that most general elections globally, if you look at the US elections, if you look at the elections in France, you look at the elections in Brazil, climate change was a defining factor in those elections. And if climate change, our global warming, is the biggest threat we are facing as a nation, sometimes we just pretend not to understand. We are still looking at our oil, we are still looking at all those other things and thinking all is well. But I can tell you that the biggest threat we are facing in the country at the moment is climate change, because of the significant effect it has on us as a country, on us as a people. But when you listen to the political parties and go through their manifestos, you are not looking at practical, real solutions. Everything is just textbook definition of, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. You listen to them and you hear, oh, we're going to fight poverty. Yeah, we're going to build infrastructure. Yes, poverty, how? Build infrastructure that the floods will come and take away within a few seconds. So we're looking at telling us, what will you do in terms of building real climate resilience? And that's exactly what our people want. I don't want to promote political parties, because I've gone through some of the manifestos. Some of them have something a bit tangible to say, but of course, like I said, it is easy to just copy and paste here and there. And then when it comes to you telling us what you would do, that is where we can interrogate you and understand that you know the issues and these are the solutions.
Well, in slight defense of the politicians, there's this popular thing that people say, politics is a game of numbers, and the numbers actually matter, and that's what matters to the politicians. And they believe, okay, we speak to what is important to the people. The people are hungry, they want to get out of poverty. The people, the economy is bad, we're going to tell them how to be able to do that. Could it be that what the politicians are saying is a reflection of their audience? Because they believe that the people are really not interested in climate change. If I go and tell you about climate change, I'm just going to waste my time, and these people are not going to vote for me. If I tell them I'm going to give them food on the table, that is what they want to hear. So is it now because the people are showing less interest in climate change, that is why the politicians are taking it to the back burner?
I don't agree so.
Okay.
Reasons being that all of us are impacted by climate change in one way or another.
But are we concerned enough?
So,
as a people?
Yes, we may not be concerned enough, especially for those who are not aware of the issues. And they are in the majority. I'm talking about our farmers. Now, this year, look at the flooding again. Jigawa was worst hit in terms of agriculture. I'm from Benue. I know the effects of that flooding in Benue. I know what happened in Kogi, but I can tell you that Jigawa's farmers were worst hit by the flooding this year. And if they realize that this is climate change, then you are speaking to them that, look, we know what the cause of this flooding is. I'm not just limiting it to flooding. We are talking about short duration drought. We are talking of desertification up north. We are talking about, farmers not knowing when to plant anymore. The climate is changing. The seasons are changing. Before now, an old man in the village can tell you when the onset of the rains. Mm-hmm. All that is gone now. And majority of farmers depend on rain-fed agriculture. So you go plant this week, and then the next week there is no rain. 2 weeks after, no rain. 1 month, no rain. What happens? All your investment gone. Now, these are the people, they are in the majority, and they are even the ones that vote more. So you should be, campaigning and telling them that these are some of the things you would do in terms of helping them build resilience. In times, yes.
So could it be that maybe when it comes to building climate resilience, it requires much more of a global approach than local? Could it be part of the reasons why there's a seeming, lack of attention on this issue?
You see, when the flooding happened this year, who suffered more? Was it people outside the country, people in the global north, or sometimes that perception that, oh, we didn't cause this problem, so we shouldn't act on it? But we are already being impacted. So, yes, it is a global issue. The climate knows no boundary. Other countries are facing the same issues, such as we are facing. The flooding in Pakistan last year, the effect is in billions of dollars, okay? Ours is even less. Look at the global north countries that you think are also doing okay. The US, you saw the effect of snow this year and the number of persons that have died. In Latin America, it's everywhere. So it requires, yes, a global approach, and that is why the UNFCCC have come up with the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. The Paris Agreement is there. And the good thing is that Nigeria has always been part of it, starting from Rio 1992 to the Kyoto Protocol, to the Paris Agreement, and then to what the present administration has taken some steps to do. President Buhari, credit to him, passed the Climate Change Act. It is now an act. We have the Energy Transition Plan of the government. We have our NDCs and all of that. Yes, but at the moment, many of it are still at that policy, level. So yes, I agree that it requires a global approach, which we are doing presently, but then we need to act more locally.
Okay, so what should we be doing, on the local front? In the last disaster that we saw, that of the flood, massive effect of that. Hundreds of thousands of farmlands destroyed. We understand more than 200,000 houses were submerged. 600 people died. Talking about, not to mention the people that have been injured, displaced, 1.3 million people, massive impact. And people attributed that to one dam in Cameroon and the fact that there is supposed to be a buffer dam that should have been built, to at least mitigate the impact of the water flow around that axis. What should we be doing locally in terms of some of these things, building the resilience here?
So I will first say that the people in Jigawa, there's no dam from Cameroon that led to Jigawa State, right? But they suffered the impact of that flooding within that year. It's not just Jigawa. I was watching on your news now, the president was in Yobe, and one of the candidates was talking about building houses for people that were displaced, yeah? But if you see the flooding that took place in Jigawa, in Yobe also this year, it was very massive. Some of these things are not reported. And we're not just limiting it to the flooding alone. Look at the massive sand dunes. We are losing land, arable land, especially in the Sahel region. And Yobe is a big victim of that. Massive desertification coming in. And majority of this is caused by our human action. So coming back to building resilience has to start with us as a people. First, we have to respond to disaster, okay? Early warning systems let people know that flooding will come. Yes, I know that the NIMET and the Nigeria Hydrological Services issue out warnings, but how many people obey them? How many people listen to this warning and take it seriously? Our farmers will still go and farm in the flood plains, and you'll be surprised to learn that most of the houses that were flooded are already occupied again. People have gone back to their houses again, unfortunately.
Because most of them don't have a choice. They don't have anywhere to go. So they have to go back to where they were.
That is the resilience building we are talking about. Okay? We need to map our land and look at where are the vulnerable areas and mark it out clearly to say these places have to remain as buffer zones. These places can be forested. I mean, if that happens, it's even better for our environment. It's part of the resilience building, okay? So people will move from those areas. Farmers need information. People need information, not just farmers. We are here in Abuja. I saw the report over 24,000 people were displaced even within the FCT, okay? And lives are lost every year in FCT as a result of flooding. We're not talking about, and FCT is not connected to any dam in Cameroon or
right,
anywhere.
Let's talk about practical things now.
Yes.
You just talked about early warning systems and the rest of it.
Yes.
Last year when that flood actually happened, most people were saying that, NIMET, we heard it. They said it. The rains are going to come. The flooding will happen. They said it months before the rain started. And we waited for it to happen. It was after it happened that when we started running helter-skelter, buying mattresses and everything. Like, what could we have done between the time NIMET issued that warning to when the floods actually came? What could we have been able to do practically to mitigate some of these things?
You see, this is why we are talking about the government, in quote. We are talking about the political parties taking climate issues very seriously. People, for not being aware, we believe so much in God, and when we hear these things, we say, God forbid, and then it happens. So sometimes there is some level of enforcement that needs to come in. Okay, because if you allow yourself to die, you are reducing our population. It affects our statistics as well, So, but on a very serious note, there is the need for us to plan, like yesterday, not today. Unfortunately, the floods happened last year, and I can say that all the committees are still working. The rainy season is just around the corner, and who knows, this could happen again. But people need to be relocated from those areas, okay? These are practical things that need to happen. Our farmers people must move away from flood plains. Our farmers should not depend solely on rain-fed agriculture, okay? That the droughts can, wipe it out, or the floods will wipe it out. There are practical examples even within the country. We know that during the dry season, it is when vegetables and fruits are cheaper. Why? Because our people up north depend majorly on irrigation, okay, to get grains. Fruits and vegetables. So these are some of the things we need to do, so that we can farm 3 times a year. It's very possible. Other countries do it, so we don't depend on rain and just farm 1 time a year. And
okay.
So
some of these things that we talk about building resilience will not come cheap. These are capital-intensive projects. These are things that will require a lot. Having these early warning systems in place. Having, some experts have even talked about dredging the River Niger and Benue, irrigation, and the rest of them. These are things that will cost a lot of money. And it is happening at a time where Nigeria, I don't know, in terms of revenue, we're not doing so well. Look at the 2023 budget. You have almost more than 50% deficit there, right? So how do we source funds to do this? Especially if you look at the fact that there doesn't seem to be willingness to pool that resources when we talk about the Climate Adaptation Fund at the global stage. So how do we source funds?
So yes, this is usually the discussion, even globally. Other African countries and other Latin American countries and the small island states are some of the issues they are facing. But I can tell you that there is funds available. It is the right approach, coming up with the right and bankable projects that will attract the funds. They are there, nobody will just give you. I mean, if you take a quick check at how much Nigeria has benefited from the Global Climate Fund, from the Adaptation Fund and all the other funds, is very minimal, very small. And the reason is that we are not able to come up with those kind of projects that are acceptable. They call it bankable projects. And so you have countries like Brazil and small island states benefiting the more. There is also huge funds in the private sector. I mean, what are we talking about? One of the first steps to show climate action is to remove fuel subsidies. I know people will say, if you do it, this will happen. But we have all agreed, and all the political parties have all agreed, all the presidential candidates have accepted that these are some of the things they will do. One of the first things they will do is to take out fuel subsidies. So you have a pool of funds that you can use, for some of these infrastructure projects we are talking about. And we are also saying that some of these projects shouldn't be projects that impact negatively on the environment. Another local way we can get funds is simply let the polluters pay. We see what is happening within our environment sector. I mean, go to the Niger Delta and see the devastation by the oil companies. Every year we talk of gas flaring, we're going to end gas flaring by so year and so year, and it's still happening today. You let the polluters pay. Each huge funds. Just take a look at the FCT and look at the huge plastic waste that we generate every year. Somebody has to pay, because all of this will end up within the environment. And we also is a major contributor to the flooding we are experiencing in FCT. We've lost nearly all the forests within the FCT because we are building estates, right? I mean, the usual practice is if you cut down trees, you pay, right? But who is paying? Because there's no enforcement. And this cut across the country. So, but
we seem to, talking locally now, we have some sort of a systemic problem in terms of enforcing or implementing policies that has to do with the environment. We talk about town planning, in the FCT, you talk about cutting down the trees and the rest of them. How can we strengthen our systems such that they can implement some of these policies?
It starts with leadership at the top. And that's why we are saying that we need leaders. I'm not just looking at the presidential candidates alone. We're looking at the senators. We're looking at governors. Once upon a time, we had a Donald Duke who was governor of Cross River State. And the state will always be rated as the cleanest Calabar then. I don't know what the situation is at the moment. So it starts with the leadership. If you have a leader who clearly shows, that he is environmentally friendly, that he has love for nature, that he wants to act on climate, people will follow. And the system will also follow. Because if you don't do it, you get fired. And there are people who would and are ready to do it. Because, these issues affect all of us. It affects all of us. If you trash and it ends up in the drains and nobody clears it and the rains come and then it gets flooded, your house gets flooded, who pays? This year, the former president President Goodluck Jonathan's house was also flooded. So it is not just the poor, but it is also the rich. Everybody is impacted. If we are talking of air pollution, does air pollution affect only the poor people? No, it affects everyone. And where do they come out? Emission from cars, emission from our generators, emission from all the industries around. So we simply need that leadership. That is what is lacking. And that's why some of us are saying, look, tell us what you would do for climate. For me, I'm still looking for that candidate. With my one PVC, I'm looking for that candidate. It may not be one of these political parties that are known. With my one vote, I'm voting for climate. That is my presidential candidate. Climate is my presidential candidate.
All right,
yes.
so now we've talked about the global effects of global warming and climate change, and of course we brought it back to Nigeria. Now I think I want to localize it further. Let's talk about states now, individual states. We talked about how devastating it was for some states or the other. I bring this up because there's one particular state that I know that was very prone to flooding, most especially within the metropolis. Almost every year it happens. But when this massive flood happened last year, it really wasn't that affected. And I had to find out what happened, what changed. And I found out that the state government took it upon itself to dredge the river that was actually in that particular state, and that reduced the effect of the flood. So are states taking it as seriously as it should? And if not, if we can get them to do that, will that make the difference?
Yes, I want to agree with you on this. Our state governments are lacking in almost everything. Unfortunately, all attention is always at the federal. Where are the people? They're in the states. Where are the farmers? In the states. When the floods happen, where? The states, right? So it is the state government's responsibility, okay, to localize some of these things we are talking about. It should start right from the state, at the local government level, so that we don't leave everything at the federal. But unfortunately also, the federal, for example, everything about environment and climate change, the attention is mostly on the Ministry of Environment. The Ministry of Environment is just here, right? You have a very big country. We're talking of afforestation. Where are the forests? They're in the states, right? So the state government, good enough, most of the states have the state emergency management agencies. How well they are, well equipped, how they are financed and all is an issue. And so most of the state ministries of environment, you can hardly say what they do, except for a few big states like maybe Lagos and a few others. They just go around harassing people on the street. But the real issues are there. And so the state government need to build first their capacities, right, of the people in those ministries, not just environment, because this issue is cross-cutting. Climate issue is, as we've mentioned, is gender. So you have Ministry of Women Affairs, right? It is water. So you have ministries of water. It's agriculture. It is forestry. It is energy. One very big thing that we have not actually talked about, but I know that as a country, this is a very huge issue. And one of the political parties talked about how they are going to, I would say, solarize Nigeria. And, it's already...
And again, if you look at the issue of how the globe is moving away from fossil fuels again, that should be a major concern for us in Nigeria, looking at the fact that that's our major source.
This is why sometimes our country, sometimes people are scared to talk about this issue. But when you have a serious issue and you are running away from it, it will still come back to haunt you somehow. But in all of this, there are opportunities. And that is going back to the energy issue we're talking about. Will the world continually depend on fossil fuels? The answer is no. Okay? It will reduce. it will reduce drastically.
So perhaps we should fast track our diversification agenda. I mean, that's something that would,
energy transition. Our president has already promised that Nigeria will hit net zero by 2060. 2060 is just around the corner. So we need to act fast.
All right. All right, thank you so much. It's a good place to end the discussion. Because of time, we couldn't go further. We look forward to having you again on the program to talk more on these issues. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our guest is the team lead, GIFSEP, and Africa Regional Coordinator, Citizens Climate International, David Mike Teungwa. Thank you again for joining and for your perspectives. We'll take... well, we've come to the end of the show, not a break really. We hope that you join us again tomorrow for another time on the program. In case you have missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube channel where we stream live. Bye for now. I am Ayuba Ilya.
So it's been an amazing ride right here on Daybreak on Trust TV. Let's do it all again tomorrow. I am Ibrahim Yusuf.